Hi, everybody. This is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the Heidi St. John podcast. Today is Mailbox Monday. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from politics and answer some questions from listeners. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Well, how are you guys doing? How are you holding up? I hope that wherever you are, you've been leaning into the Lord and into what He has for you as we move into a very, very close election season. And a lot of you guys have been praying with me on weekdays at 8 a.m. If you haven't done that yet, head on over to the Heidi St. John podcast and click on the subscribe button. And once you become a subscriber to Heidi St. John, we will send you a link and you can get the image that we are praying through. And also you can join me every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We pray for about 20 minutes. I have been kind of given some devotions and reading some quotes from our founding fathers and just praying over our nation. So every week we have a little bit different focus leading up to the election. And then for those of you who are so inclined to join me on Tuesdays, we are fasting together. So fasting and prayer on Tuesdays and then praying Monday through Friday. And you guys can join me by simply subscribing to HeidiSt.John.com. So HeidiSt.John.com, you'll see up in the top right-hand corner, as soon as you get there, there's a subscribe button. Click that, and that will give you access to that Zoom call. So we've got lots and lots of people on that Zoom call every morning at 8 a.m., and I hope you guys will do that. If you would like to submit a question to have answered here at the show, the way to do that is simply to go to HeidiSt.John.com/mailbox Monday, and that is how you can submit a question. We love answering your questions. Please keep them short and sweet and to the point, and that way we'll know which questions we're going to be answering in the weeks to come. First question comes from Debbie in Colorado. And she says, "Hey, Heidi, I saw you speak at a homeschool conference in Denver this past season. My son came home with a book called Big Nate. The page that is bothering me the most is the one about a man saying he is a technophile. A technophile means a lover of technology. And then the young boy Nate, who's the main character, asks the man to take a picture of him to make him look like Trudy's hot boyfriend. I am of the firm belief that this is grooming, and I don't think I'm overreacting. My son is 8. What are your thoughts?" So to be fair, I don't have an 8-year-old boy anymore in my house, and so I had to sort of look this up. But Trudy, I think you are correct. It looks to me like this is not something that is suitable for a child of 8 years old. It was definitely written to hit the middle school age. But after reading reviews from parents and sort of looking at, this is like a comic book, a graphic novel for kids, a lot of people are really complaining about this. This person says, the book has 0 educational value. I was highly disappointed. This was checked out to my 2nd grader at his school. After he read it, we decided to scan through the whole book to see why he liked it so much. We had a discussion about treating women like objects instead of human beings and how that is wrong. She said there's a lot of too much sex in it, a lot of sexual references. This seems to happen over and over and over again. One person said that her 2 older kids read the first 3 books in the Big Nate series and really enjoyed them. She got books 4 and 5 a couple of months ago. His 12-year-old son read them. And then when her 8-year-old son decided to begin reading, she and the 12-year-old informed her that it might not be appropriate. Well, I mean, call me uptight. It seems to me that if it's not appropriate for your 8-year-old, probably not appropriate for your 12-year-old either. But as I'm reading this at Common Sense Media over and over and over again, inappropriate for kids, not sure why this is available in our elementary school library. You guys, listen, the Big Nate series, by the way, is the least of the things that you need to be worried about in your kid's elementary school library. I'll just leave it at that. Follow my friend Karen England if you want to find out what's going on in your kids, in your public school kids' library. But over and over and over again, this is a parent of a 10-year-old said completely inappropriate for children. This one said, I wanted to like this series for my sons, but I cannot recommend it at all. Here's why. 9-year-old Nate, our protagonist, speaks often about a comic femme fatality, and it is sexualized. I skipped so many parts so my son would not have to hear it, kept reading, hoping it'd get better, and it just did not get better. This person says that the series normalizes pornography. A lot of people really don't like it. So I would say that's probably a 0 out of 5 stars from Heidi St. John from what I'm reading on the interwebs. So take that for what it's worth. And Debbie, good job. Seems to me like you've used a little bit of discernment there. It's kind of, I think, for parents now, we have so many things that we're fighting against on any given day, whether it's what our kids are exposed to on social media, what they're exposed to in the grocery store, at the checkout line, all these things. And you just cannot be careful enough. And this is another one of those examples. Next question comes from Joanna in North Carolina. She said, "Hey, Heidi." Well, hey, Joanna, how you doing? She said, "I love your podcast and I listen to it weekly. After Hurricane Helene, I have been hearing that the government manipulated the direction of the hurricane path. Then Hurricane Milton went through Florida and it left me wondering if that one was manipulated as well. Is this something you have heard of, or are you familiar with it? I thought only God could steer hurricanes, but I don't put anything past this administration." Okay, so Joanna, this is sort of what I was talking about last week when I said I have purposely not talked about this stuff on my show because we can't prove it. There's so many things that we can't prove. There's so many quote unquote conspiracy theories out there. I don't even like using the term conspiracy theory because frankly, most of the so-called conspiracy theories, particularly as it has related to COVID and things like that over the last several years, have panned out to be absolutely true. And so they gaslight you by telling you you're just a conspiracy theorist and so shut up and sit down. But I do think there's a time for us to take a step back. And if we're wondering, is the government, moving hurricanes back and forth? You guys, I understand that there's cloud seeding, and I think that's actually happening. In fact, no one is denying that is happening. They're definitely trying to manipulate the weather. It seems to me that this is a bit of a reach. And I have really dear friends that live in Florida, and one of them texted me a history of hurricanes in the southeastern part of the United States. And there are some pretty weird ones, even 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago in that area. And so I think that there are a lot of things that are happening right now that are hard to understand, hard to explain. Certainly, the Bible talks about how things are going to get super weird in the end times. And I think, and you guys have heard me say this before, I think, boy, the shadows are lengthening. That is for sure. But I would just encourage you, we can't get ourselves all tied up in knots. So let's just say, Joanna, let's just say that it's true. Let's hypothesize that that the hurricanes are being manipulated by human beings, and now whatever agency is able to push a hurricane into the mountains, for example, of North Carolina, and it wasn't, this wasn't just a catastrophic, unavoidable event. Let's say that was true. So if it's true, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? And this is my point. You're going to do nothing about it. Because there are entities, even if it was true, which I frankly don't think it is, but even if it was true, there's nothing that we can do about it. And we sit here and we wring our hands and we're upset and we share all these stories back and forth on Telegram, and people get all up in a knot and they get all stressed out and worried and anxious. And the Bible says, do not fear. In fact, the Bible says, don't worry about tomorrow because each day has enough trouble of his own. Well, that's the truth. And so I want to focus on things that we actually can change. We can change our leadership through voting. We can change what's happening in the education system by taking our kids out of the public school system and by going to our state legislatures and exposing what's happening in the public schools. We can talk about pornography in our libraries. We can certainly do something about that. Can we do something about a man-made hurricane? Absolutely not. We can't. And so we can do something about our food being poisoned, right? I was watching my friend Alex Clark marching on Kellogg's last week, and I was like, girl, you go. Get it, girl. I thought that was fantastic. That is something we can do something about. And so when it comes to all of these, and we're going to hear more and more. We're going to hear wars, the Bible says, and rumors of wars. Last week, we watched as the IDF finally took out the third mastermind behind the horrific murders that Hamas committed in Israel on October 7th of last year. And there was nothing we could do about that either. But you know what we have been doing? We've been praying. And so, Joanna, I would say I would spend less time worrying about that and more time going, Lord, there are so many things happening around me. What would you have me be involved in? How would you have me use my voice? Right now, I'm writing a Bible study that we're going to be going through next month over at Faith That Speaks. So this month we're doing kingdom culture. And next month, we're going to be doing kingdom currency. So what is the currency of the kingdom? Well, the currency of the kingdom is relationships. So we're going to talk about relationships. You guys have influence. You should be developing relationships with business owners and with parents in your community. Get to know your neighbors. We've lost a sense of community, and we lob, bombs at each other over the internet. And I believe that God would have us engage in the culture in a much different way. And so while there's nothing that we can do, outside of prayer, right? And God knows what's happening. So even though we don't, God does, right? God understands. I mean, if there was a hurricane that was being manipulated, God would know. And so pray about these things. Pray for, as Jeremiah said, the peace and the prosperity of the city in which you live. Because if it prospers, you also will prosper. And so I would say concentrate on the things that you know you can change and the things that you know that God would have you be involved in, and pray about the things that you can't change or that you don't understand or you don't know are true. And I just think that's a really good way to look at all the crazy things that are happening around us. To me. We had an anonymous question come in the other day, and it says, I, like you, came out of a terribly dysfunctional childhood. My homeschoolers are now 18, 19, and 21. I believe God has healed much in saving me and my husband. I struggle with feeling like my adult children don't like me much, and I've been in therapy off and on for the years to work on my issues. Have you struggled with any of this, and what advice can you give me? I guess... every parent struggles with wondering, did I do enough? Kids can really hurt their parents too, right? Kids can say really hurtful things in the moment, or maybe they've had a bad day and they, instead of kicking the dog, they say something unkind to their parent, and it sort of sticks with you. And my encouragement to you, it sounds to me like you're doing the work of asking the Lord to make you new. And you guys, that's going to happen until we go home. And I learned this by living with my mother-in-law for the last, 15 years and watching her age gracefully. She's so beautiful, at 80 years old, she's so beautiful. But I'll tell you, and she would tell you too, she struggles with things still. And she would say, you know what, I think I'm going to be asking the Lord for help until I go home. And that's sanctification, right? This becoming more like the Lord. And so lest I ever think I have it all together, all I got to do is, wake up in the morning to realize, oh, hey, I'm going to have a sin issue today, or hey, I'm going to struggle with this, or I might say something unkind to somebody that I work with, or someone, heaven forbid, that's in my own family that I actually really love. We're going to do things that are wrong. I think the main thing is you don't want to be consistent about it, right? You don't want to be consistently rude, consistently awful, consistently whatever. I mean, you name it. But to me, God would have you be set free. And I wouldn't worry, I don't think, about what my 18, 19, and 21-year-olds, maybe think of me all the time. I would be more concerned with, how can I become more like Jesus? How can I be Jesus to my children? How can I be Jesus to my husband? How can I be the hands and feet of the Lord Jesus to the people in my neighborhood and the people in my church and the people in my community? I keep hearing that song in my head, these are the people in your neighborhood, right? And like I said a few minutes ago, I think that we have lost the preciousness of community. When I was growing up, we sang a little song in Sunday school. It's called Joy, right? It was called Jesus and Others in You. And it went something like this, Jesus and others in you. What a wonderful way to spell joy. Jesus and others in you, in the heart of each girl and each boy. J is for Jesus, for he takes first place. O is for others we meet face to face. Y is for you in whatever you do. Put Jesus first and spell joy. Simple, right? Pretty simple. I grew up singing that. I sang it to my kids. Jesus, others, and you. And see what the Lord would have you do. I think sometimes we live in a culture that really likes to navel gaze, right? We want to look really closely at all the things that are wrong all the time. And I just don't think it honors the Lord. And so it sounds to me like God's doing a continuing healing in your life like he's doing in my life. I think he's going to be continuing to make me more like him. Show me where I'm maybe, blowing it. I'm going to have to apologize a whole lot more before I go to heaven. And in the meantime, I'm going to be trying to have as much influence on the people around me as I possibly can. And so I would encourage you to do that. Let the joy of the Lord be the thing that defines you. What would happen, you guys, if we were known as men and women of joy, men and women who loved other people and loved the Lord, and we were working hard to see good things come to our communities? I think we'd see real change. And so, especially now as we're coming into an election season, I would just encourage you that way. And you know what? Also, can I just say, I mean, I don't know you at all, but I just want to remind you how much God loves you, that you have come out of a dysfunctional childhood. And it sounds like that was hurtful to you and you had a hard time getting over it. And you've raised 3 kids who are now adults, and you recognize how much God has healed you in saving you and your husband. And he has good things for you. Lots of life left to live. Live it with joy and see what God will do. All right. An anonymous listener in Georgia says, I feel called to continue homeschooling our children, but my husband wants to send them to a private school. I've done lots of research on my own, but he has not and thinks our kids need schooling from the outside. Do you have advice, resources for my husband and I to look out together as we pray and talk about this? Well, the first place I would probably send you is to my friends over at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Lots and lots of articles about homeschooling. Listen, the statistics are in on home education, and home education works. We are cranking out just thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs, kids who love the country, who actually know the real history of our country. And I'm not an anti-private schooler, but I still believe, and I'm just going to keep saying it, I still think homeschooling is the gold standard because it gives you back what the school takes away, be it private or public, and that is time. It's time. You never get that time back again. And as someone who's, most of my kids are grown now, I would say, I look back and just can't believe how quickly the time went. And I think you'll probably look back and say the same thing. So I would look at those, look at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and also, pray about it. I wouldn't let this be a divisive issue between you and your husband, because the enemy wants you fighting with that man of yours. He wants to bring strife and division into your family. Maybe what you need to do also is go down to your Christian school, meet the school administrators, talk to them, interview the teachers, and then sit down with your husband. Maybe you go away for the weekend. And you pray about it together. I was listening to, this is pretty funny. If you guys have little kids, maybe turn off the podcast for a second. I know a lot of you guys listen to this with your babies. But I listened to an interview that Tucker Carlson did. Oh my goodness, it's been maybe 6 or 7 months ago now. And he was talking about being married to his wife for a very long time. He's been married almost as long as my husband and I have been married. And he was saying, boy, he said, marriage is hard and it involves compromise. He said that when he and his wife are stuck, if they're in a place where they just can't get along, he's like, I rent a hotel room, we get away for 3 days and we sit in that bed naked for 3 days and we work it out. And I was like, so I brought that up to my husband. I was like, listen, this is what Tucker says. And Jay goes, I feel a fight coming on. I'm pretty mad at you right now. I'm going to go ahead and book us a room. My point is, love that man of yours, love him, work this thing out with him. I wouldn't let it be a thing that divides you. I mean, he's not asking you to put your kids in public school. That to me would be, that would be really, really difficult. And I still think you should be able to make the case that you want to be home with your kids, but you want to consider all of the aspects to how you're doing homeschooling. I mean, I don't know if how does your husband feel about, maybe are you struggling? Does he come home from work and see you, in a fetal position every day because homeschooling is just wearing you out? I mean, there probably are more reasons than I understand for your husband's position on this. And so I would say, take a weekend if you guys can get away. Take a weekend, get away. If you can't get away, lock yourself in your room and work it out. One of the things too that I have loved to do over the years is we put a little dorm refrigerator up in our room. And we keep, a little stash of my favorite cheese up there and hummus and some olives and some charcuterie. And if we needed to, boy, we could lock the door. We got a coffee maker in our room. We could lock the door and stay in there for days and never come out. And sometimes that's important. Sometimes it's necessary. So this was something we learned a long time ago when we didn't have, access to babysitters and we needed to get away. That was largely how we did it. So we just stocked our room with all of our favorite things. It worked out really great until I decided to, so you guys are going to love this about me, but My husband breaks or fixes the things that I break often. And it's been this way in our marriage since day one. Anyway, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I noticed that there was a little bit of ice on the back of the freezer component of this little dorm refrigerator. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And I tried to get the ice off and I couldn't. So I hit it with a wrench or something. And I heard this hissing sound. And I didn't know what that was, but obviously it was the Freon, escaping the refrigerator. And I still had things in the refrigerator, didn't realize that I had basically ruined it. And a week later, I went to open it, and it was a science experiment in that refrigerator. I'll tell you what. And after that, Jay was like, listen, if you don't think it's cold enough, call me. But we have another little refrigerator up in our room, and it's kind of it's one of my favorite things. So I would just encourage you, work it out with your husband, and don't let the enemy drive a wedge between the two of you, because that, my dear, is what he would really like to do. Last question comes in from an anonymous listener in Indiana who's asking about homeschool freedom. She said that I had referenced several times my time in Nashville recently with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association at the National Leaders Conference, and they gave a State of the Union there talking about some threats that are coming up in homeschooling, and we're certainly seeing more of this. It's absolutely on the rise right now, and so I invited my friend Jim Mason, who is the president of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, just doing a great job over there. I invited him to come on the show, and I just thought, who better to address this than my friend Jim Mason? And so I'm going to ask Jim about some of the threats to homeschooling that are coming up. I want you guys to look this up. There's some really interesting things that are going on, and Jim's going to talk about this more in just a minute. But there is a proposed model legislation coming out of a group that basically hates homeschooling called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. And we're gonna talk about this. But what I want you to be aware of and be thinking about, is membership in the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I'm a super fan of what those guys do. We'll talk a little bit about that. Jim and I will also. And also be praying. Be praying for protection over the freedom that we have. The vast majority, you guys, these studies bear this out resoundingly, that the vast majority of people that homeschool their kids are wonderful parents who love their kids, who are having wonderful outcomes. That's the truth. And while we see an increasingly hostile segment, it is a small segment of the population. And I think our job here is just to continue to meet our legislators, to go to your state capitol day, to talk about how homeschooling has been a blessing for your family. Share the good things that homeschooling is doing for your family and for your kids. And I think that is a huge part of how we combat this narrative that homeschooling is somehow making children unsafe. So they're trying to do this model legislation, and they're calling it the Make Homeschool Safe model legislation. And of course, the title of that legislation infers that homeschooling is inherently unsafe, which isn't true. And so Jim and I are going to talk about that. And so I'd just like to welcome my friend Jim Mason to the show. Hey, Jim, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you.
Oh, it's always my pleasure, Heidi.
So I was just at the National Leaders Conference that HSLDA hosts every year, and we sat into the State of the Nation address. Several of the attorneys from HSLDA kind of bringing us all up to speed on, basically just attacks that are coming, which they do from time to time against homeschooling. But the last time you were here, you noted something that we are seeing increasing in the culture, and that is that the knives kind of are out for homeschooling. You'd said that you felt like the pendulum had probably swung as far as it was going to swing in terms of homeschool freedom, and now we're starting to see it swing back the other way. I'm getting lots of questions from listeners here about kind of what exactly we're talking about. And you guys really, HSLDA is doing a great job of kind of being the watchman on the wall for this stuff. What kinds of things are happening right now in the United States that signal that we probably should be paying attention to people who really don't want to see homeschooling thrive in the United States?
Yeah, there are some real ideological opponents, people who have a different worldview from that we have advanced all these years, and that is that parents, as the most caring people for their children, should be given wide latitude, lots of freedom in how to raise, educate, and nurture those kids. And the homeschool freedom in many, many states has just advanced and advanced over the years since we started 40 years ago. There's still a handful of holdout states that we'd like to see some improvements in the homeschooling law, but for the most part, across the country, it's pretty free. Well, that is what's likely to be challenged in this immediate legislative season by those who think that homeschooling is a haven for child abuse, and that is a dark view of homeschooling that is being used, I think, wrongly to encourage legislators to clamp down on all homeschoolers because of isolated events. So I just did a podcast interview earlier today, in fact, with a Michigan former Speaker of the House in Michigan, where in Michigan, one of those bills is being considered. We became aware of this several months ago, and we've been working like crazy in the meantime. And so far, homeschoolers reaching out to their own representatives in Michigan have no bill has actually been introduced. And I mean, I must say that I am surprised, and it's really a matter of praise to the Lord for that, because a few months ago it seemed like it was imminent. I just got in my email box just about a week ago that Oklahoma is so Oklahoma is an interesting state. Oklahoma has a constitutional provision that protects homeschooling, and so the legislature in Oklahoma has never really regulated homeschooling. But there is an outfit there called the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy, and they have gotten together with a legislator who convened a meeting with folks who want to impose regulations on homeschooling in Oklahoma. And one of the primary attendees of this meeting were representatives from an organization called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. And that organization's been around now for a little over a decade, and they are, what I mentioned in my speech and what the State of the Nation, the attorneys described. They have proposed a model bill called Keep Homeschool Safe Act, which is many pages long, and it's designed to kind of reimpose many of the barriers to homeschooling that have been removed over the last several years. And this legislator in Oklahoma is citing their participation as they are experts in this area. And we disagree with them. We have a different view of parents' rights and the relationship that parents have with children and where the state should be getting involved. Those are just two examples. There's Illinois. We're expecting similar activity in the legislature in Illinois, and we are working with the homeschoolers up there as well to prevent that from happening if we can. And if a bill is introduced, then we'll work to keep it down.
So I want to touch again on the this proposed legislation from the quote unquote Coalition for Responsible Home Education. Mm-hmm. I love the names of these groups because make homeschool safe. It's like because it implies that it's not safe. I mean, that's the whole point, right? So the implication is very it's just very in your face that they have to do the Make Homeschool Safe Act because homeschooling is currently not safe, right? That's the premise. But it sounds good on its face, but then as you guys were explaining what was in this bill, there's actually some levers in there that would really strip rights away from parents. And I was wondering if we could kind of go through some of the things that are in this proposed legislation, because they're talking about doing this federally, correct?
No, they're doing it state by state.
They are? Okay. I was
Yep.
under the impression that that they were taking this thing straight to the top.
No, it's a model act, and so we've done model bills through the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, where we write a bill that legislators from the different states can come in, and then they can pull from our model bill and introduce some version, maybe exactly what we proposed, or some version of it in their own state, tailored to their own state. So that's what they've done, and that's the idea that they now have something in writing that they can shop to state legislators on this false premise that homeschooled children are less safe.
Yeah,
than
that they're
other
inherently
children.
unsafe. Right. Yeah.
And so, some of the things that they want to, as you know, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states and D.C. and the territories, but each state takes its own approach because, as the United States of America is, each state has sovereignty, and each state approaches, through federalism, each state approaches legal issues in a different way. And education is always been thought to be primarily a state issue. So every state has its own law, and what they're proposing, a whole variety of things, but many states, have pretty much. Many states do not have a requirement that homeschoolers register or file a notice. That's the one thing that they originally want. They want every state to have a notice. They want to impose requirements on who can teach. And that just goes way back to the bad old days, because the early battles in the homeschooling wars back in the 80s and 90s was about who could teach. And the states all pretty much universally thought that homeschooling could only be done by certified teachers. So unless you were a certified teacher, you couldn't teach your own kids at home. And that was a huge legal battle for many years, and legislative battle for many years. They wouldn't require parents to be certified teachers, but they want to reimpose requirements on who can teach, when all of the research shows that when parents choose to take on the task of educating their own children, their love for their children and the personal involvement, leads to the parents being as successful or more so than certified teachers. And a big reason for that, of course, is the individualized attention that parents can give to their children, as opposed to trying to manage a classroom of 30 other kids. They want to impose the ability of superintendents to be able to place homeschools on probation or even suspend the right to homeschool.
While they do their investigation.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right. And so one of the things they want is, if you're pulling a child out to homeschool, you have to give 30 days advance notice, as you mentioned, while they investigate whether that's a good idea for your kids or not. The 30 days advance notice is otherwise known as unconstitutional prior restraint. If you have a right to do a thing, you shouldn't have to wait for permission by a government official to do it. Their model act, it presupposes a lack of trust in parents. Generally, there are things that they would prohibit some people who are simply being investigated by child protective services. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from personal experience, this is a very typical situation. You have a parent whose child is having struggles in the public school for any number of reasons. Say they have special needs, or they're being bullied, or the parents have tried to work with the school to solve the situation. And then they just get tired of it, and they pull their child out to homeschool. This doesn't happen so often anymore, but it used to happen more frequently, where the public schools would then say, well, if you're going to pull out, then we're going to investigate you. And they would, call CPS, oftentimes for unfounded reasons. And often those investigations would be, wound up pretty quickly because parents have a right to pull their kids out of public school to homeschool. So that kind of a situation would, you could, your right to homeschool could be predetermined because you're under investigation on allegations that are false or overblown. Mm-hmm. That again is just a worldview difference that we just don't share with them. Parents should be presumed to be acting in the best interest of their children until they demonstrate otherwise.
Well, so this is the same thing as you're guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty, which is how our justice system has always worked.
Right. It is exactly right. And we should not have to go hat in hand to ask permission to do something we have a right to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jim Mason, you're just doing a fantastic job over there at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. In the minute that we've got left, can you tell our listeners a little bit about HSLDA and what you guys do?
Well, HSLDA is an organization that advocates for homeschooling, and we advocate especially hard for homeschool freedom. We represent individual families when they're challenged, and we do that for the sake of the entire homeschooling movement because often when a government official comes after one family improperly, when we get involved, we can fix a problem for the whole school district and oftentimes even the whole state. So we are involved in court cases. We're involved in legislation all across the country. And we are homeschoolers ourselves. Debbie and I homeschooled our 7 children right straight through. Most of our lawyers now were homeschooled as children and are homeschooling their own children. So we are homeschooling from top to bottom. We advocate for homeschoolers because we love homeschooling and we love homeschoolers.
I love that. If people want to join HSLDA, what does that look like?
Well, HSLDA is a membership organization, and if you want to support the cause, you can come to our website and join. It's hslda.org/join. For annual dues of about $135. You get a lot of personal services and member benefits, and if you're ever challenged with your right to homeschool, then you have 24/7 access to our legal team. And more importantly, it gives us a lot of clout when we can say that we have 100,000 member families across the country. So if you just support the cause, whether you're homeschooling your kids or not, maybe you're already finished, maybe you're grandparents, you can still support the cause of homeschool freedom by joining HSLDA.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I highly recommend it. Jay and I have been involved in the work. I always call it a ministry because to me it's a ministry. But the work of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association since we started homeschooling our own kids, so over 25 years ago. And I can't recommend it enough. It's a great way not only to secure your it's just like insurance. To me, that's how I saw it in Oregon, was to say, hey, look, if CPS comes to my door and I don't know what to do about it, I know I can pick up the phone, call HSLDA, and they'll walk me through it, and they're going to help. And so really important, and we so appreciate the work that you guys are doing. Jim Mason, thank you for coming on the show and for leading the troops over at HSLDA. You're doing a great job, and it's just great to see you again.
Well, thank you, Heidi. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and to be on your podcast.
Thanks for coming on. We'll do it again.
Great.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the podcast today. I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me directly, HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday, or you can email us info@HeidiSt.John.com. Again, we want you to join us every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. I am praying for our nation from 8 o'clock to 8:20, and you guys can do that by subscribing to HeidiSt.John.com. Just click on the subscribe link at the top right-hand corner of my website. And once you do that, it's going to email you that Zoom link and also a whole bunch of freebies, a talk that I've given, some screensavers for your phone, and a graphic that you can pray along with us as we come to election season here in the United States. So I hope you guys will take advantage of that. And also join me at my women's ministry. Faith That Speaks is doing a study right now called Kingdom Culture, Bringing Heaven to Earth, Keeping Jesus at the Center of All Things. And for the month of November, we're going to be doing something I'm calling Kingdom Currency. What is the currency of the kingdom? It is relationships. We have a lot to learn about relationships in this age of technology, And we're going to be doing just that next month at Faith That Speaks. Also, you guys, don't forget, come out and say hello. I am still traveling and I would love to see you guys. I'm going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina on the 25th and 26th for the E-Women Conference. They're expecting close to 2,000 women at that event. It's going to be wonderful. They've got some great speakers. Check them out online, or you can go to HeidiSt.John.com/events to find out more. Thank you for listening. We love you guys and we love hearing from you. And I will see you right back here again at the intersection of faith